Now, I want to just kind of overview a bunch of races happening very quickly, a long list. A lot of you are in certain areas of the state. So if you're in North Texas, you might know more of the races going on in North Texas. If you're in Collin County, maybe you know the slate of conservatives running in Collin County, but you don't know what's going on in Houston. So what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm just going to kind of go, there's no particular order. I just put all this together and we're going to go through different races so we kind of get an idea of what's actually happening, right? So I'm gonna start here. So you have Abraham George running against Candy Noble in House District 89. Candy Noble was elected in Collin County, ran as kind of a conservative, got there, supported the impeachment of Ken Paxton, became really just like another participant in the general Austin swamp. AJ Louderback and Jeff Bauchnight are running in the Jeannie Morrison seat. AJ is probably the more conservative person in that race. Jeff Bauchnight is the mayor of Victoria who literally voted to raise property taxes while he was mayor. He got elected and then he went to the library and asked them to like keep inappropriate books in the library. So that's not good to do, and then run as a conservative Republican. But that's Mayor Jeff Bauchnight in Victoria, Texas. Jeannie Morrison was a very long-serving member of the Texas House, and so when she leaves, she's probably one of the 10 most senior members of the legislature. She's retiring. Alan Schoolcraft is running against John Kemple. Alan Schoolcraft is a state representative who served in the 80s. Actually, this guy got elected in 1981 to 1993, is running against John Kemple. There's also Greg Switzer, and I believe another person. I don't know the other person in that race, but these three individuals are running against John Kemple, and John Kemple is a very liberal Republican who's also one of the 16 incumbents that voted with the Democrats to kill school choice and to protect teacher unions. Now, there were 21 Republicans that did that, but 5 of them are not seeking re-election. So that leaves 16 incumbents that are now the target of people like Governor Abbott and other school choice. If you're somebody who that is your key issue, that's the issue you care most about and you want to work most on, then the John Kemple, Alan Schoolcraft, Greg Switzer race will be one that you want to actually look at and follow. Andy Hopper is running again against Lynn Stuckey. Andy Hopper is a longtime conservative activist. Lynn Stuckey is a very liberal Republican. Andy lost by 88 votes 2 years ago when he ran against Lynn and is running again for that seat. That's in Wise County and Denton County. Cole Hefner has 2 opponents, Jeff Fletcher and Dewey Collier, who are both running to hold him accountable. He, again, is somebody who was all on board impeaching Ken Paxton. He also serves in powerful positions under Dade Phelan's regime. And the Calendars Committee, which Cole Hefner serves on, is a committee that kills a lot of Republican policy. And so he basically participates with Dustin Burrows as kind of one of his under lieutenants, in a sense, on that committee to kill a ton of GOP policy. Barry Warnick is a guy running against Morgan Meyer in Highland Park Cities area. Morgan's also an impeachment manager against Ken Paxton, a very liberal Republican. The most liberal Republican in the Texas House is who Morgan Meyer is. Morgan is a nice guy if you meet him one-on-one. He's easy to get along with, but he votes with Democrats more often than any other Republican. And that is a bit of a problem, I think, to most Republicans, which makes sense. Kyle Biederman is running against Ellen Troxclair again in the Texas Hill Country. That's House District 19. Carissa Richardson is running against Frederick Frazier, as well as Chuck Branch. And so you have 2 people, both conservatives, running against Frederick Frazier. All you got to do is go to texasscorecard.com, Google Frederick Frazier, or search it in the search bar. You're going to have a bunch of articles about how Frederick Frazier's impersonated government officials. By the way, he's a cop, so he knows you can't impersonate another government official, but he did so anyways, and was dishonorably discharged from the Dallas Police Department because of committing crimes. And then you have Katrina Pearson against Justin Holland. And Dennis London is also running in that race. You have 2 different conservatives who are running against Justin Holland in the Rockwall County race. It also has a lip of Collin County in that district as well. Justin Holland not only was one of the 16 Republicans who's seeking re-election that voted against school choice, but also voted to try to pass gun control last session, is a very liberal Republican. And so, and again, I could, if I saw Justin tomorrow, I'd say, hey, Justin, hey, Luke, how you doing? What's going on? I don't have a personal problem with Justin Holland's existence. I do greatly disagree with his desire to consistently vote with Democrats to pass liberal policy. So if I was a constituent in his district, I would vote according to my own kind of principles and the things I actually want to see happen policy wise. There's an open seat in Four Prices race. Now, Forprice, again, if you meet him, very nice, respectable guy, but also pretty consistent liberal Republican voter in the Amarillo area. The kind of lead candidate that most people see as the most likely to succeed him is a young woman named Caroline Fairley, and she's already received the endorsement of Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz and Sid Miller and Ken Paxton and Ronnie Jackson and Kevin Sparks and everybody in that area, the mayor of Amarillo, mayor of a bunch of cities. The Fairley family has been a longtime conservative activist in Amarillo, very respected. And she, in her own right, has been a successful businesswoman. And so you just see Caroline stepping up, and everyone sees that as a real likely potential conservative upgrade. There's an open seat going on for Craig Goldman, who is seeking the congressional seat left by Kate Granger. And I think I'm going to get these. There's a young woman. I can't ever remember her name. She's a lobbyist, I think, of some sort. And then there's a guy named Steve McQueenie. And then there's a woman named Cheryl Bean. And they are all running to replace Craig Goldman in Fort Worth. Darren Meese is running against Jeff Leach, and Darren is a sitting city councilman in the district. I don't know whether he had to resign his seat to run against Jeff, but he is running with the endorsement of Ken Paxton and the support of all the local grassroots in that area. David Covey, of course, as y'all know, is running against Dade Phelan. Alicia Davis is also another candidate running in that race, which means that it could potentially go to a runoff. But David was on the SREC, has been a longtime Republican activist, has received the endorsement of Sid Miller, Ken Paxton, seems to have, just from his early finance reports, raised a little bit of money to make himself a serious contender. David Lowe is running again against Stephanie Click, and David ran last election cycle against Stephanie Click and got almost 47% of the vote, even though she spent over $1 million in the Republican runoff. So Stephanie Click is a vulnerable Republican ultimately, because she just keeps voting with Democrats. If she stopped voting with Democrats so much, she'd probably be a lot less vulnerable for re-election, but that's her decision. I mean, I don't control any incumbent. They can vote with Democrats however much they want, and they can go back to their district and tell them why they do. But David Lowe is seeking that seat again. Mayor Don McLaughlin, I think, is the kind of leading contender in Uvalde, running to replace Tracy King. Now, this is a district that we will actually likely flip from blue to red. It's the only Democrat district currently represented by a Democrat state representative where Donald Trump won in 2020. So that kind of gives you perspective. There's other districts that we could win, but they would be districts that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in. Okay, so you're less likely to win some of those seats. This one seems like a more likely to flip red. Don McLaughlin is the mayor of Uvalde and is somebody who a lot of people know. He's the one who yelled at Beto O'Rourke when he came into the press conference that was being held with Ken and Angela Paxton. Governor Abbott was there. He was there. A bunch of community leaders were there following the shooting of Uvalde, and Beto O'Rourke came in and tried to make the whole thing about him. And the mayor's the one who shouted him out and told him to get out of the building. So he's a little bit of a local legend, good guy, very excited about the potential of him replacing Tracy King, to be completely honest, because just somebody who would be, not only a Republican, but probably a good Republican. Helen Kerwin is running against Dwayne Burns. Now, Helen Kerwin's mother is Brooke Rollins. Brooke Rollins is kind of a pillar of Texas politics. She helped really take the Texas Public Policy Foundation from a respected think tank to a much larger respected think tank in Texas, and then went on to be Donald Trump's domestic policy advisor. Her mother is a former Republican official in the Somervell County area, and Dwayne Burns represents Johnson and Somervell County. He's also one of the 16 incumbents who voted with Democrats against Governor Abbott and the Republican platform and Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and everybody else on school choice. And so he's got opponents there. Jared Woodfill is an attorney who's running against Lacey Hull. Lacey just has a very, I would say, liberal Republican voting record as a whole. She's sometimes good, most of the time bad, a proponent of impeaching Ken Paxton, and somebody who has just been more than willing to side with Democrats on some pretty radical policies. If you just kind of go back and look at her record. Joe McDaniel is running against Jay Dean. Jay Dean is in the Longview area of East Texas. And so Joe McDaniel is a Republican activist and a businessman from East Texas running. Jay Dean is one of the 16 incumbents that voted against school choice. John Perez is a sitting school board member who's running against Mano de Ayala, who is a freshman member who replaced Jim Murphy. And Mano was somebody who I thought was going to be a good potential upgrade from Jim Murphy. Jim Murphy was a pretty consistent liberal Republican. Again, nice guy. If you meet him, he actually came into the legislature with my dad in 2006. They were freshmen together. So I don't harbor any ill will against Jim Murphy other than the fact that he just votes with Democrats a lot. So Mano came in and really a lot of people thought he was going to vote with Republicans a lot more and didn't end up being the case. So John Perez is a school board member, an engineer, kind of a respected, I would say, local community activist and official who has decided to run against Mano and seems to have a decent amount of support there. Katrina Pearson is running against Justin Holland. I think I already talked about her. Liz Case is running against Stan Lambert in Abilene. And Liz is a longtime Republican activist who anybody who's been really involved in Republican conventions and things like that know that Liz has been around. She's been serving. She's been advocating. She's been fighting for conservative principles and is now challenging Stan Lambert there. He's one of the 16 Republicans that was with teacher unions. Another Republican with teacher unions was Steve Allison, and he's being opposed by Michael Champion and Mark LaHood. And this is in my backyard. I've got family in that district. I literally, my church is, I guess, a stone's throw away from the district, and I'm 8 minutes from the district. And so a lot of friends and family in that area. Mark LaHood is probably seen as the more serious challenger against Steve Allison in that race. Michael Champion, I've met him as well. Very nice guy. But Mark has already received the endorsement of Greg Abbott, raised some money. He has name ID because he was the Republican nominee for district attorney 2 years ago. So already kind of established and people are aware of who he is. There are two individuals running against J.C. Jatan, but I think the more prominent one is a gentleman named Matt Morgan. Now, J.C. Jatan, I call him the tip of the spear for advancing the transgender or protecting the transgender movement in Texas would maybe be the way of saying it. Protecting. I don't know if he's trying to advance it, but he's definitely trying to protect it. He fought Tony Tinderholt on an amendment Tony had that said that this grant program that was going to go to build all these mental health care facilities could only be accessed by mental health care facilities that weren't socially transitioning kids with radical transgender ideology. And he got up and convinced 10 Republicans to vote with him and gave a speech against it and basically said, we need to give money to people regardless of whether they're socially transitioning these kids. Very strange and kind of a gross position. And so JC has the opposition to Matt Morgan. Congressman Troy Nehls has endorsed Matt Morgan, who's very popular in that area. A lot of conservatives have supported Matt Morgan. He is a longtime Republican conservative activist. Mike Alcott is running against Glenn Rogers. Mike is a friend of mine. Everyone knows this. I've talked about him on the show before. We already talked about that race, but that's Parker County and then two counties west of Parker County, Palo Pinto County and Stevens County. Okay, so those three counties are what make up that district. Mitch Little, many of you know him from the Ken Paxton trial. I would say after Tony Busby, no offense, Mitch, but after Tony Busby, he was the second most prominent attorney in that trial period. And so Mitch Little is running against Kronda Timish in Louisville, Denton County. And a lot of Republican activists in that area who are also supporting Mitch. He's a very prominent attorney and now probably somebody who came on the stage Texas politics-wise through the Paxton trial. Shelley Luther is running again against Reggie Smith. She ran 2 years ago. It was about I think it was a 42 to 58% race, and she is running again. Shelley Luther is the salon owner who opened up even when there were shutdown orders and kind of rose to prominence as a result of her decision to do that. And so Shelley lives out there in Grayson County and is challenging Reggie Smith. Reggie is also one of those 16 Republicans who voted with teacher unions and the Democrat platform over the Republican platform. Steve Toth has an opponent. Steve is a friend of mine. He's one of the few conservative fighters in the Texas House of Representatives and has an opponent who's more of a liberal school board member in that area. And so if you're in the kind of Houston area, just be aware of that race that's going on. Tom Glass is running against Stan Gertis. Tom Tom is a longtime conservative activist. If you aren't following Tom, you should. He has a newsletter he sends out regularly during the session with updates on different bills. He's there working different legislative policy, trying to fight to advance as much conservative policy as possible. Tom is running again against Stan Gertis. That was an open seat 2 years ago. Tom came just like 100 votes shy of the runoff. And so now he's running against Stan Gertis head to head. Wade Cowan is running against Dustin Burrows. Other than Dade Phelan, Dustin Burrows is the one who has killed the second most conservative policy in Texas. So if you're saying who's killed the most conservative policy in Texas, it's Dade Phelan. You say, well, who's number two? Oh, it's Dustin Burrows by far and away. Not that other members don't participate, but Dustin Burrows is probably the second most powerful state representative in Texas, and he has killed a ton of conservative policy that's needed to even like protect children from sexualization and things like that. So it's not okay. And Wade Cowan is a farmer in that area who's decided to run against Dustin Burrows. Wayne Richard is a businessman and longtime conservative activist who's literally came up in like the Tea Party time, 2008, 2010, running against Matt Shaheen. They're in Plano. Wes Ferdell is running in now the open Andrew Murr seat. He was running against Andrew Murr, and now he's running against Hatch Smith, who's kind of the Andrew Murr handpicked replacement there. Wes is a longtime activist, Gun Owners of America state director, so Second Amendment activist, and somebody who's just respected by a lot of people out there. Chris Spencer and Dale Holes are running against Gary Van Dever. Gary Van Dever is a liberal Republican from Texarkana, and one of the 16 Republicans that voted with teacher unions. And so Chris Spencer and Dale Holes are two more conservative challengers to Gary who are running, and that is going to be a highly contentious race. I anticipate that race going to a runoff personally, if I were to predict. Josh Feuerstein has the America First Network, has done several other things in business, and is running against Keith Bell, and that is Kaufman and Henderson County. If you're in that area, Josh Feuerstein is running against Keith Bell. Jay Curtis is a gentleman who's running against Cody Harris. Paulette Carson is running against Trent Ashby. I'm trying to go through these because there's more to go through, but I just want to give you all kind of this perspective. There's an open seat, Kyle Casal seat. You have John Harvey Slocum, Trey Wharton, Ben Bias. They're probably all more conservative than Kyle Casal. The important thing there is getting the most conservative we can to replace Kyle Casal. Maureen Bell, I believe, is a woman named running against Will Metcalf. Janice Holt is running against Ernest Bales. Janice ran last time, got a decent amount of support, so she's running again, trying to kind of build a base of support against Ernest. Ernest was at the forefront of all this Colony Ridge stuff. He's also one of the 16 Republicans that opposed Governor Abbott's school choice agenda. Janine Chapa is running against Terry Wilson. She's a longtime Republican activist, precinct chairman, got a lot of support from the grassroots there. Lisa Ramirez is running against Greg Bonin. Hillary Hickland is running against Hugh Shine. Hillary was somebody who was down in the Capitol advocating for conservative policy, especially the policy where we were trying to get pornography out of school libraries. And so she was kind of front and center active in that policy debate and is now running against Hugh Shine, who's one of the most liberal Republicans in Austin. Carrie Kingsbury is running against David Spiller. Again, David Spiller, I mentioned earlier, because he was the one who came out and said, I'm not with Glenn Rogers. And it's one of the reasons he might have done that is because he's got his own race that he's dealing with. Carrie Kingsbury is a Republican, active Republican in, I can't remember which county she lives in, maybe Montague County, but she's an active Republican at one of the Republican clubs there, a businesswoman. Stormy Bradley is running against Drew Darby. Drew Darby is, again, one of the more liberal Republicans. He's also kind of a staple of San Angelo and a little bit of a pillar there. Not the easiest guy to defeat, but Stormy Bradley is also she's not a nobody running. She's a sitting school board member. From all accounts, she's working very hard out there. Tim Greason is running against Stan Kitzman, and Stan Kitzman's one of those 11 Republicans that wanted your taxpayer dollars to go to socially transition kids, go to these institutions that are going to build more facilities so they can socially transition more kids. So that's Stan Kitzman for you. He really does need to kind of wake up. Stan was somebody who showed up and everybody's like, I think he's going to be pretty good. And other than being for school choice, he was pretty bad. And so I don't think that Stan meant. I don't know. Some of these people, you show up and you go, I don't know if you mean to be as bad as you are, or if this is just really who you are. Ken King is being opposed by a woman named Karen Post. And Ken King is, again, one of the 10 most liberal Republicans in the Texas House. Karen is a Republican chairman in Hale County, if I get that right. I'm doing this from memory, so I don't have like all these notes in front of me. I just have the names. So I'm just telling y'all what I recall or remember or know from conversations I've had. But Karen Post is the Hale County GOP chair, I believe, and is running against Ken King. He's also one of the 16 Republicans. Brent Schofield is a former school board member who's running against Giovanni Capriglione. And then Jack Reynolds is running against Charlie Guerin, who is a longtime liberal Republican. Chad Carnahan is running against Angie Chen Button. Chad, for anybody who's in Dallas County, they probably know Chad. He's a conservative Republican activist from that area. Angie Chen, consistent liberal Republican. Bianca Gracia is running against Briscoe Cain. Briscoe Cain, again, is somebody who, the way Briscoe does it is he's like, I'm going to vote right on most votes. On most votes, up or down, I'm going to vote on the right side. But on the really big ones that leadership really needs me on, I'm going to be there, like impeaching the attorney general or like stopping the ban on Democrat chairs. And then he'll actually go and posted, there's a speech that Briscoe Cain made, literally saying, I'd rather some Democrats be chairman than some Republicans. And this was his way of ingratiating himself with House leadership. Sad reality where at any point Briscoe could have decided last session, I'm just not on the train. I don't want to be on this game, team that's killing all this conservative policy. And all it would have taken was showing an ounce of independence by saying, I'm not going to vote to impeach Ken Paxton, right? Not only did he vote to impeach Ken Paxton, he then was one of the managers that went to the Senate and told them Ken Paxton was guilty. So Bianca Gracia is a conservative activist in Houston area, in Harris County, and she is running against Briscoe Cain.